Hey everybody, it's Alexa. Have you ever thought that exercise itself seems to be so complicated and the methods that we're taught seem to be intricate and filled with rules and equipment and gear and rigorous plans? Well, there is a more minimalist approach to exercise and there's a more natural approach to it. And I came across some concepts around minimalist exercise in a surprising place in this book, Natural Born Heroes by Christopher McDougall. Now, he wrote Born to Run, which was a wonderful gonzo journalist style book about endurance ultra marathoning, talking about the Tarahumara Indians and others who went to vast new lengths to run, and the concept that we are meant to be runners as humans. So this new book by McDougall, it's only his second, but in a similar vein, it ties together the concepts of endurance and what humans are designed for with sort of heroics, and in this case puts it in a really fascinating historical context too by focusing on the resistance on Crete during World War II, how the Cretans, it's hard to say Cretans, resisted Hitler even though they were vastly outmanned and outgunned. It ended up being this tremendously resourceful guerrilla warfare that ultimately defeated Hitler with his Greek efforts and sort of hastened the end of the war. So the subtitle of this book is How a Daring Band of Misfits Master the Lost Secrets of Strength and Endurance. But what he does is he has these sort of three parts, quest, physiology treatise, and running history. And it's very exciting. It really inspired me when I was on my recent camping trip. I was diving through coyote tunnels and imagining that I was in the Cretan wilderness. And one thing I've found that's sort of interesting is several times in my life I'll be reading a book and I will be in a place that is reminiscent of the book. So I happened to be there on Point Reyes, and the crashing waves and the surf and these scrubby hills, and it felt like I was in the book, living this life of daring do that these British misfits were managing to basically be these dirty tricksters and defeat Hitler. So there's Crete, and it's a small island, maybe 130 miles long, something like that, in the Mediterranean Sea. But the point of this book is really, it's also inspired by Greek and Minoan and Cretan heroes, and sort of suggests that their type of heroism had more to do with grit and sinewy adaptability than sheer force and strength. So a common theme throughout the book is that modern exercise has become obsessed with large muscles and with the use of weights and machines and repetitive movements, when the original natural exercise is nothing like that. And the most fascinating concept that I came across early on in the book was this idea that there is fascia wrapping all of your muscles, spiraling around all of your muscles on your body. And this fascia itself has strength. So that if you compare women to men, sexual dimorphism in humans is actually not that great. It's only about 15%. And a lot of the sexual dimorphism that we see in terms of exercise or strength performance has a lot to do with learned behaviors among women, and that we actually have all this rubber band like fascia strength that we can deploy when we move more with a more flowing, leaping, parkour type, infant type natural movements. We have this band of fascia that runs all the way across the chest and the arms. And so this creates like a rubber band, of strength. And, even a woman has, a similar amount of strength, across her fascia as a man. So anyway, I just love it when I come across new things that I hadn't been aware of. So the fascia strength was definitely a new one. All of the discussion of parkour and natural movement was fascinating. This idea of fascia strength and the art of Wing Chun, which is a martial art that Bruce Lee studied apparently, and it was invented by a woman, although the book says it's possible it even itself came from Crete. Um, and so there are some fascinating stories in here. John F. Kennedy had found an old order that required U.S. Marines to hike 50 miles or ride 100 in less than 72 hours. Teddy naturally led the way by doing the ride himself during a winter rainstorm. Some of Teddy's troops finished the hike in a single day, so JFK made that his challenge. Could modern Marines cover 50 miles of wild terrain in 24 hours? But before the military could give command, civilians, including Kennedy's own kid brother, beat them to it. At 5 a.m. one freezing Sunday in February, Bobby Kennedy set off with 4 Justice Department aides to hike the C&O towpath from D.C. to Harper's Ferry. All 4 aides dropped out, but by midnight, Bobby had hiked 50 miles in less than 18 hours. The race was on. College frats, Boy Scout troops, high school classes, postmen and policemen, pretty secretaries, and beautiful girls, as the U.S. News and World Report put it, all tackled the, quote, Kennedy Challenge. Congressional staffers marched off in mobs, and a pub in Massachusetts offered free beer at the finish of its own 50-miler. The 50-mile hike verges on insanity, warned the National Recreation Association, and the doom prediction was seconded by the American Medical Association. We get distressed when people go out and strain themselves. News photographers fanned out to capture the carnage and instead found the same expressions on faces across the country. Grins of pride. So this is a pretty interesting story, and I had certainly never heard about this, that people all over America were trying to do these 50-mile hikes. And he goes all around the world. He talks to these Brazilian guys who believe in natural movement. This guy named Erwan Lecorre, a French guy, Georges Hébert. He also gets into some tricky territory about fueling on fat and fascia. He discusses Phil Maffetone's beliefs that the way we consume sugar sort of short circuits our ability to burn fat. And I always find some of these types of concepts a little bit disturbing, just because I feel like, what you eat, it's like discussing religion. It's highly personal and controversial, and likely there's not one size fits all. So that part was a little bit, I don't know, it conflicted with other things that I have read, especially since I have been sort of thinking since the Olympics about sort of high-speed training and more intense training, and then this is sort of arguing that the Maffetone method is arguing that you should sort of do very long, slow endurance, which is sort of the opposite of what I've lately been thinking about. I'm focusing for the purposes of this review on some of the exercise concepts, but the central theme throughout the book is this incredible plot to foil Hitler by capturing one of his generals, kidnapping him, and then hiding him in plain sight on the crags of Crete under the nose of 80,000 German soldiers. And the things that they do are in terms of disguises and fighting back, and the pluck of the people of Crete is absolutely fascinating. Another side note in the book is the concept that maybe the Greek myths and all the various heroes in the Greek myths were born out of reality, out of actual real characters, because they're so detailed. So there's an interesting argument in this book that bodybuilding is really that bodybuilding is a capitalist plot, basically, in this book, because previously there was a lot of emphasis on fight training, but that took up a lot of room. Bodybuilding is about staying in one spot. It requires remarkably little floor space. If you're not sitting down or lying down, you're standing or squatting. The idea is to isolate one muscle group at a time and blast it to the point of tearing, repeating the same movement over and over until you approach muscle failure. Like any other damaged tissue, the stressed spot will swell. That's an emergency reaction, blood rushing in to immobilize the area and initiate healing. Oddly, that discomfort became a selling point. Because bodybuilding is about appearance, not skill, sore and swollen muscles began taking over as a sign of strength. The arrival of the Nautilus in the 70s, specialty machines that made you feel like a pro, and they talk about the health clubs becoming big business, and the dawn of super males with the advent of anabolic steroids in the last 30 to 40 years. That's obvious. I mean, if you've ever watched a bodybuilder running, it's like watching a side of beef. It's not efficient, the amount of muscle they're carrying is past the point of efficiency, of course. There's this concept by this guy named Hébert, a French guy, who had said, you should be fit to be useful. That should be the point. So the book has a lot of mentions of various natural methods, including parkour and this Brazilian guide. And I want to follow up on those ideas and explore them. For me, it touched on a lot of themes that I love, which are sort of adventure, aspects of physiology and exercise that go contrary to conventional wisdom, especially around, age and gender and training methods. Like I said, the only point I have a little trouble with, but I think there may be merit to it, but it seems to me like if we're going to get to natural training methods, then why wouldn't natural eating be a corollary? And I mean, he's basically sort of advocating a paleo type diet. He says, diets are stupid, more like a test, cutting back or eliminating sugar while your body kind of resets. And that kind of makes sense to me. It's just that I think that probably if you sort of learn to listen to your body in terms of food, then that's possibly better than adhering to any one specific diet. And another diet that kind of comes up is the Mediterranean diet, and that's sort of been mentioned many times in many places as something to strive for. The book, like I said, the stories of World War II were mind-blowing and exciting and riveting. It was a little bit difficult to follow at times because he does jump around a lot, but I heartily recommend this book, and I commend Christopher McDougall for managing to pack so many fascinating themes into this book and then use this World War II resistance on Crete as the frame for it all. So I highly recommend this. Let me know what you think about natural training methods for minimalist fitness. Thanks for watching. Bye.